Welcome to the 2015 UT Social Media Week at the University of Tennessee, brought to you by the College of Communication and Information and hosted by the School of Advertising and Public Relations at UT. This year's theme, The Power of Social Media, will provide our students, faculty, and the Knoxville community with a great opportunity to gain leading-edge knowledge about the uses and impacts of social media. The 2015 UT Social Media Week at the University of Tennessee is brought to you by the following sponsors: WATE, 6 on your side; Coca-Cola Bottling Company Consolidated, Coca-Cola, Open Happiness; and Dead End Barbecue. The search is over.
To hear me? I brought my notes today because I have a tendency to go off on little tangents and rants, so I'm going to try to stick to the program. There are literally thousands of nonprofit organizations that are using social media today. So I actually get to work with two that are pretty consistently in the top 100. So if you look on the web, you look up top 100 nonprofits, you're going to find the American Red Cross is part of that, and United Way. So I get to work with both of those. And I'm going to talk to you about some of my personal experiences through my work with American Red Cross Disaster Relief. And then just for the last couple of months, I've been with United Way of the Ozarks for 2 months now. So I'm learning a new format for communication that is outside of that disaster crisis communication. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my personal experience. And we're going to look at social media philosophies and why digital matters. What is the big deal anyway? Why is social media such a big deal? I want to introduce you to the idea of digital volunteering and advocacy. So that's a really big word that I use a lot. It's an important word to me, being an advocate. So we'll talk about what that means. And then finally, we'll look at how all of these things together can really help you promote professionally and with an organization what you're talking about in the online spaces. So really power up your online presence. So social media philosophy. I was really intrigued to find out that whenever I went to the United Way, that this philosophy was the same. So we really talk about, in nonprofit organizations, how can we use social media to really execute the mission of our organization online and really empower people and get that space, the online communities, engaged with what we're doing. So we're also providing information. So we're sharing what we're doing. We're providing people tools, ways that they can also get involved to be a catalyst for change. So I use the word catalyst almost as frequently as I use the word advocate, because we really are all about not just talking, but taking action. So how do we get people to really impact their community in a positive way? So I added this hashtag Live United because this is a thing that we talk about when we say we're getting involved and we want you to be involved also. United Way has a slogan, Live United. You've seen it all over, I'm sure. But the interesting thing about that was never intended to just be a slogan. It's an action. It's a call to action. It's a strategy. So when we say Live United, what we want to do is empower people and show people how they can actually do that. What is the action behind Live United? So we're going to talk about why digital matters, this building relationships, and I can't see the bottom of my slide. Let's see. There's something else down there. So we'll get the full scope of this, but we'll just go on to this why digital matters. So when we think about people talking in conversations that are happening online, one of the biggest things that we know as an organization and just as human beings is the conversations are happening whether we are there or not. So we want to make sure as an organization, if someone's talking about us, what are they saying? And how can I be part of that conversation? So looking at the idea of having fun with Facebook, sure, go ahead. Walk this way. Okay. Do you want me to wing it?
Yes.
Great. What does this mean, winging it? So people ask me all the time, so what do you do all day? And I write press releases, and I play on Facebook, and I tweet people, and I have conversations, and I build relationships. And so what we're talking about today is, why does that all matter? And it's really about being where the people are. So as an organization, people are talking about us, they are engaged in activities, and we are going to take our input and give them more value because we're gonna hang out where people are. So it is fun, and I can blow an entire afternoon on Facebook, I'll just tell you. Having conversations with people and having that interaction, I don't just sit in my office anymore. I'm actually connected to people, and it's one of the funnest, most cool things that I think about my job, being a public relations professional, that relationship part of public relations. Social media allows us to do that on a daily basis. We're still winging? All right, I can do that. Hey. So before we go any further about that part, I do want to just put a little plug in here for the art of writing a press release and knowing how to do an online interview, doing radio interviews, all of these things about PR and journalism and all of the things that you're learning. There is value in that. The traditional media aspect of what we do every day, that's not dead. It's not going away. Social media just adds to that. Yeah?
I'm on the ad side. When you say online interview, are you talking about chatting or are you talking about sending emails back and forth?
So really any form of communication. So it could be a TV interview. It could be being able to stand in front of a camera with the news crew and project and talk to people in that space. It could be sitting in front of a video blog. I mean, it could be any of those number of things. So we're even taking this back to what I call traditional media and saying it's really important to have face-to-face interaction with your journalists, with the media, and being able to do that as well as communicate in social spaces. So now I'm going to give you a little insight about me. I am terrified to be up here right now. This is not one of my favorite things about being a communication professional. Public speaking, not really my favorite part. Put me in front of a TV camera, I can do that interview like nobody's business, I'm fine. But I tend to talk really fast and get really excited in front of people. So I'm working really hard at that. And so it's something that I think we always have to be learning, and we always have to be willing to put ourselves into those spaces and try things that are new and terrifying. So now we're back on track. Thank you so much. So this is kind of what we're talking about, the direct impact of being there. So communication is happening. People are talking about us. And I'm going to give you some examples of how being there can save lives, build your credibility as an organization and as a professional. Fundraising, a whole nother aspect that's really started to take off in the online spaces. Connecting directly with media, I do this on a regular basis. Our journalists follow me on Twitter, and so I might inbox message them whenever I have a pitch that I want to make. So it's a traditional pitch that I'm doing with media, but it's in an online space. And then, of course, entertainment, telling a story, creating connections, that call to action piece. So this is Moore, Oklahoma in 2013. And I was deployed to this disaster. Devastating tornadoes took out multiple communities. And this is saving lives and building credibility. The Red Cross in this situation had an opportunity to literally save lives. So we had digital volunteers. I was boots on the ground. Digital volunteers that were watching and monitoring what people were talking about on Twitter. So at one point in the afternoon, there were about 18 people that were really completely disconnected from anywhere. They were shut off from everything. The only thing that they had was Twitter. So they were tweeting, "We're stranded, we have no electricity, we have no water, we don't know what to do, we need help." Digital volunteers were monitoring those conversations. And literally, this is one of the first times that service delivery changed because someone was paying attention to what people were saying on Twitter. Lives were saved. This truck, not this one specifically, I'm sure, but an emergency response vehicle just like this was loaded up with food and water and taken to that very remote area where they could connect with the people who were stranded in this community. And they had food and water. So saving lives, it's a big deal. Building credibility. Another example of credibility with the Red Cross was, again, in 2013. We had a lot of disasters that year. A lady and her daughter were at a shelter down in the Louisiana area. Hurricanes were predicted, and they had been evacuated from their home. So they went to the Red Cross shelter. A couple days they'd been there. This volunteer was very, very tired, I'm sure, but she was grumpy. And she made a stink about giving this lady's daughter a cracker. So what happens? This woman goes immediately to Facebook. So she is sharing her terrible experience at the Red Cross shelter and how they were so mean to her daughter on Facebook for everyone to see. But they were watching. Volunteers, the Red Cross was watching. They saw that happen. They immediately were able to contact the national headquarters team, contacted the people at that shelter, the shelter manager, and they said, "Hey, we have a volunteer that might be exhausted. We need to look into this." And they did. And the next tweet was what built the Red Cross credibility more than anything. It was from the lady who had posted on Facebook about the Red Cross being terrible, and now she was an advocate for how amazing it was that they listened and they changed what was happening because she had shared her discomfort. So when you're listening, it's happening. If we wouldn't have been in that online space, what would our credibility look like to the people that woman was connected to? This is my dear friend, Sophia Greenwalt. She's 16. She was honored as an American Red Cross Everyday Hero back in 2011. And I had the honor to meet her and her mom and her family. Just a great, great family. Well, Sophia has this project at school called Helping Hats. And I put a link here, and it looks like this will be available for everyone. So you can actually take these links and follow them. This goes to a Red Cross blog about this experience for Giving Tuesday for Sophia. Sophia has this Helping Hats program where every month she picks a different cause. And you get to wear a hat to school. You pay $1. And then the $1 that she collects goes to a cause that she's chosen. And she raises money for different causes. She's just a brilliant girl who has really a compassion for others. And she really has done amazing things. A couple years ago, she was diagnosed with all leukemia. So it didn't stop her. As you can see, she is here. This is a post from her mom on Facebook when I went and accepted a check for the fundraiser that she did for the Red Cross. Now, we went a little further with this online being their idea. So the national team at Red Cross was very involved, helped her build a CrowdRise site, and we surprised her with some interaction from some celebrities. So we got some celebrities from the Red Cross Celebrity Cabinet. They worked really hard, our national team, putting all of this together to really promote the work that this young girl is doing. And she's just amazing. Here she is, she's just beaming. Her fundraiser raised over $22,000 for Red Cross disaster relief in one day. So she connected with Giving Tuesday, which, are you all familiar with Giving Tuesday online? It's a great time to see what people are talking about as far as what causes are out there and what's happening in that space. So it was a really amazing event for her to see the power of online and how connecting and being with people online can be really impactful. So here are some things that I think, along with those pieces that we talked about, I kind of pulled some quotes from people that I really look up to in this space. And when I look at why digital matters, we look at Seth Godin, and he's just an amazing author, does a lot of pieces about really being awesome and the responsibility that we have. So whenever he talks about how dare you settle for less when the world has made it so easy for you to be remarkable, it's a really impactful statement. But I would like to add to that being remarkable comes with a great responsibility, especially in an online space. One of my favorites, Sam from BuzzFeed. It's very snarky, very witty. If any of you have an opportunity to read his stuff, he's very funny. We joke about this idea of being first, and you have to get out there, and he even jokes and says, give yourself at least 15 seconds. So while we joke about that, truthfully, nothing can blow your credibility faster than being known as the person who has to be first. When you push something out there that's not valid, that's not validated, you're giving yourself a bad name. So that's a very important thing that I want you to remember from Sam. And then my very dear friend, Anita Foster, at the Red Cross in Texas. She's the communication officer there. She says, news no longer breaks, it tweets. That news travels fast, and it actually is there on Twitter before it's most other places. So an example of this, a few weeks ago, I was driving through town. I live in Springfield, Missouri. Nothing exciting ever happens there. It's really low key. I'm driving through town, and I come to this intersection, and everything is shut down. There are fire trucks everywhere. There are these big emergency highway trucks with these guys, and they've got yellow things, and they're measuring things. And I'm thinking, something really serious must have happened. So I look to Facebook, where I follow our local news source. Nothing there. So I pull up Twitter. It was right there. And 140 characters or less, there was a terrible accident. There happened to be a fatality in that intersection just hours before I drove through. So that was online. It was right there. It was breaking news. That's what was going on. I found it there. And then later on that evening, they had that full story. So it's this way that things are happening so quickly that is why digital matters. Okay. So when we talk about being remarkable, there are so many ways that we can actually be remarkable. So this digital volunteer idea. One specific way that organizations are really harnessing the power of people in the online space is by empowering people to talk about what they're doing. And the Red Cross was actually very instrumental in kind of kicking this idea off that you don't have to be boots on the ground. You don't have to be in that disaster to be able to help. So digital volunteerism was born. I was working from home in 2011. I was a volunteer for the American Red Cross, and I dabbled on their Twitter feed. It was really brand new and very new to the organization. I posted to Facebook from time to time, and I wrote some blog stories. So when Joplin, the tornado happened in Joplin, they called me from the office in Springfield and said, there's been a terrible disaster. Can you stand by? So I'm standing by. I get a tweet a couple of minutes later that says, this is the address for the shelter. Can you please start posting this information online? So that came to me digitally from Joplin, where they were opening that shelter. So I was able to, from my home for a week, monitor social media and post information about service delivery, about what was happening in that space. I was just a volunteer, but I was instrumental in being the person who was telling people how to get help. It was a pretty big deal. It was a huge responsibility. And I found myself right in the middle of it. So they called me in, and I went to Joplin for 3 days, and I saw what I was talking about online, connected to it, and then for the next few weeks, continued to share the story of what the Red Cross was doing. So during that time frame, 2011, is really when the Red Cross really started ramping up what this digital volunteer looks like. And since then, that program has really grown. Okay, so we're going to look at all of these things together. And when I'm talking about digital volunteerism, this is where I want to inspire you to think about, how can I be an advocate for an organization? What's my passion? So I work for the United Way now, still very passionate about the Red Cross. I'm an advocate for the Red Cross in my community, but I'm also now connected to 21 other agencies through United Way that do really amazing things. So as a professional, part of my job is to tell that story. So from going to this crisis communication that I used to really, that was my thing, to this day-to-day, how do you tell the story and inspire others and become this catalyst for change in your community? This idea that I now am doing what this is. Your art is what you do when no one can tell you exactly how to do it. I love this quote. I'm responsible for what I do with the things that I'm passionate about. And that's a big responsibility, but I think it's really important. And I think as a society, as our communities are needing more support for things that are wrong in our world, that we can take what we do as public affairs professionals, as PR and communication professionals, how can we take our art and really make it about changing people's lives? So I love that quote, and I want to put it to memory, but that'll happen later. So be credible. The internet is full of stories about how the internet failed during certain crises. So here are some examples. The Boston Marathon bombing. So much information happening so quickly. And how many tweets were wrong, and how many things had to be corrected. So vetting the information that was coming out. If you go online, you can search for, I put a link here to a story that was really interesting about what was actually right and what was actually wrong. After the fact, now we're seeing what was happening. Hurricane Sandy. So much misinformation that happened. I was deployed to New Jersey, and I spent 18 days working in that community and helping. And what we were seeing, there's so many fake weather images, and people just wanted to be there. They just wanted to have something to add to this conversation, and they didn't really pay attention to what they might be sharing and how that would affect other people. So check these things out. Definitely a lot of things that happen, but what I want to point out, it's not the internet that failed. It's people. It's humans. It's us trying to be first, trying to get out there and have something to say, when maybe we should be just listening. Maybe we shouldn't try to add to a conversation that we don't know about. So always ask yourself, one of the things that I ask myself every day, am I adding to the problem, or am I helping and providing solutions? So is the information that I'm sharing, is it valid, or is it just adding to the problem? This last piece right here, catfishing. Are you all familiar with that term? So people who are pretending to be someone else online. It's a very interesting thing, knowing who you're connected to and really knowing them. So I'm pretty private. My Facebook has people that I am personally connected to. I know everyone. And so I'm really aware of who those people are. And then on my Twitter, over here, where we're talking about verifying your sources and pre-vetting, as a professional, my Twitter stream is actually preset with a group of people in a list that I know those are vetted sources. So knowing all of the people and understanding that this idea of catfish, there are a lot of different reasons that people do that. It could be that it's a teenager and they don't feel comfortable being in their own skin, so they come up with someone else's to be. So that's not malicious. They're just trying to find out who they are. They're engaging with people that they don't feel confident enough that they would want to do that as their own voice. So a lot of different ways. If you haven't seen the documentary Catfish, I recommend it. I watched it during my master's program, and it was very eye-opening to me about some of the ways that people trick other people and how very vulnerable we are in the online space. So there's a balance there. So whenever you're on there and you're being credible and you're being you, if you see something that's wrong, call it out. Don't let that continue to be retweeted. And I saw this just the other day, and I looked for it. I was going to do a screenshot of this and put it in a slide. But just the other day, there were terrible storms in Oklahoma again. Moore got another tornado that came through. I don't know why anybody would want to live there after, it continually happens. But that was happening again, and I saw a picture of a tornado and someone saying, "Oh, this is the tornado that hit Moore, Oklahoma." In a couple of minutes, in my stream comes a tweet from the weather person in that community who happens to be on my Twitter list because I've worked in Moore, Oklahoma, and I've followed him. And he says, this is not an accurate picture. This is from 2013. So he stopped it. So if you see something is questionable, don't be afraid to question it. Don't be afraid to. And for sure, don't retweet it. So just stop it right there. Okay, so now I want to talk just a little bit about being a good social or digital citizen. And we just talked about this in all of the other things. It's like I have this whole theme going. And this really just ties into it because it's really about being honest, be accurate. So all of the things that you're reporting, if you're retweeting or sharing, make sure that you're giving other people credit. Don't steal something. Link back to them. I share a lot of things in my Facebook space on the United Way page that come from another source. Always link back to the original agency. So if they're sharing something, then I can link it to my page. And now what's happening is I'm growing my audience by attaching to their audience. So it's twofold. It's good and it's honest to give other people credit, but when you can attach yourself to their audience, then that helps you grow your voice as well. So be relevant. Be timely with your information. So if something's happening, tweet about that right now. But I always go back through my stream, and if something happened 2 hours ago, I'm probably not going to retweet that, unless it's a photo or something that's relevant to being shared over and over. But during a disaster, things will happen so quickly, and you have to be sure that what you're tweeting is relevant to what's happening at the moment, because you can confuse people really quickly. If I just went back through and retweeted every tornado alert, those are all over the internet now, where alerts are happening in social media. You're getting alerts that say, take shelter. I don't want to retweet that, because if the storm is past, I would confuse people about, why am I taking shelter? Why is she saying this? So be relevant. Be considerate. So especially when you're representing an organization, you want to have a conversation with other people, but you also don't want to inflame or create negative situations that might come back to your organization. So be careful and considerate. Be transparent. This is really important. We all are human, and we will all at some point slip up. We will make a mistake. So I always share this story because it's one of the best stories that I know that really talks about being real. Back when I first started volunteering at the Red Cross, I want to say it was maybe 2009. Gloria Wong was the social media person for the Red Cross. She was on the Twitter feed, and she was managing that. She accidentally tweeted something from the national account that was intended for her personal account. She found Dogfish beer in her fridge, and she was so excited. So now the Red Cross is tweeting about this amazing beer that she just found. So it was instantly. I remember this, sitting there watching Twitter as a new social media volunteer, thinking, what is going on? So rather than try to hide that or delete it or take it down or anything like that, the Red Cross has a really good response to this. They immediately tweet back within probably 30 minutes, and someone else from the account says, don't worry, everything's fine, we've confiscated the keys, everybody's safe. So they took this really negative situation and they turned it into something that was, you know what, we're all human, we all make mistakes. They were transparent. They didn't try to hide it, pretend like it didn't happen. So the really cool thing about this story is that turned into an opportunity where now this brewery says, hey, for every retweet of this, we're going to donate $10 or whatever to the American Red Cross. So they turned it into an opportunity that raised money for the organization. So it was being transparent, being real. And we all are human, and we will all make mistakes at some point. Don't be afraid to be human. And that's the next one. Be human. So have good manners. And then be compassionate. So I might not have ever met any of you in person, but we connected on Twitter last week. My Twitter feed hasn't been this busy since disaster. So it's been, yay, exactly. This is a good thing for my Twitter stream to be blowing up about. So I'm very excited about that. But really, you be a friend. You can still be a friend to people that you meet in online spaces. And in fact, some of my best connections are with other professionals who can relate to something that I say, and then we end up having a conversation. I've never actually met them in person, but I consider them a friend. And we'll have conversations, and they'll retweet something that I say that's valuable, and then I'll support them. So be that friend. Okay. So we're going to wrap this up, I promise. I really could probably talk for 2 hours about this. I want to ask you guys a question. And when you think about all of the things that I've talked about, so being part of the conversation, people are talking about you, being in that advocacy role and sharing things on the community that are happening, is not being there an option? What do you think? I mean, we've talked about all the valuable things, but do you think that not being in social spaces is an option? I'm going to answer that for you. So truly what it boils down to is every organization has to answer this for themselves. And it's up to the independent situations, their unique environments, and really looking at it from a perspective of knowing your audience, what value do I add? If I'm not adding value in that space, maybe it is an option for me not to be there. Not all organizations have to be. Maybe their thing that they do isn't really relevant to what people are talking about. So last year, I did some research, and I talked to social media managers all across the country. What I wanted to know was, this research really revolved around uncertainty management theory. And I wanted to know, as a social media manager for a nonprofit organization, what is the uncertainty? What makes you nervous every day when you're in that social space? Is it an option for you to not be there because you're nervous or uncertain about it? The second question that I asked was, How do you manage that uncertainty? So my research found that yes, indeed, uncertainty exists. It is a thing, and that it is manageable. So one of the biggest things that came out of that really created consistent uncertainty was the idea that these social media managers felt like, A, they had to be in all these places, and how do they create content that's relevant and timely? And what if they do it so well that they're so engaged in online conversations that they can't do the other parts of their job? So all of these things were really real. These social media people, that's their job, and that's what they're doing. It was really hard, by the way, to be a social media manager and do that research without wanting to put my own thoughts into it, but being very open to understanding maybe they don't feel the same way that I do. But what I found was that the majority of them did, that this is overwhelming. What if I do it so well and I'm so engaged that I can't step away from the computer and now I'm stuck? So what else came out of this research was it's manageable. That having a communication strategy is key to being there and doing it well and not being overwhelmed or scared about it. So whenever we talk about all of these things, all of the whether you're there or whether you're not there, the key is traditional media is not dead. That's still a thing. Press releases are still a thing. All of these different ways that we get information and that we give information, that's a thing. Social media is a thing. And that if you incorporate those into a strategy and you really have a plan for it, that you can manage any of that uncertainty. So thinking about all of these different things and where your favorite spaces are, this is where my notes say insert rant. So I want to go back to that question when we're talking about being in all of these spaces, about understanding your audience and really appreciating that each of these spaces has an audience, and that if you are going to be there, that you know why and what value it adds. So for the United Way, we have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and we're working on an e-newsletter. It's kind of a new thing. With the Red Cross, we were on Flickr, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, blogging. So we have these spaces, but they all had a different audience. So we're working on making sure that our audience is connected with us in those spaces. But just because they're out there, again, doesn't mean you have to connect with them. So one of the rant that I like to do is to really look at specifically who you're connecting to in that audience. So I am giving you a best practice here. It's what we all look at, what's best practice and what are other people doing. I do not connect my Twitter account to my Facebook account to my Instagram account. No connection. Because each of those audiences are different. So whenever I'm putting something on Twitter, then I'm talking to my Twitter community. And we're engaging in a platform, and that's where I am. So I like to relate this to being at a comedian. You're at a comedy show. You're standing in the lobby. And they're piping the show in through the loudspeaker overhead. So I can hear it. I can laugh about it. But I can't connect to that comedian. I can't connect with the people in the audience around me. We're all kind of just separate. So if I want to engage and I want to be part of that and I want to heckle that comedian, I have to step into that room. So think about when you post what audience you're posting to and knowing that that's a specific place. So end rant. I'll go back to the regularly scheduled slide here. So talking about not being there, having advocates that can be there on your behalf. So some places, there are not enough hours in the day and not enough time to really focus on doing it well. It doesn't mean you don't have to be there. It means you get other people to become an advocate for you. Now, every single one of you probably has something that you're passionate about. Am I right? A cause that you support, something that you believe in. Why not start talking about that? Why not be an advocate for that information, to share that in a personal way? And then you have just helped Like, I help the Red Cross still as an advocate, talking about the story and sharing that story continually. So wouldn't it be cool if we were trendsetters and if we started a new trend where it was really okay to start talking about things that we're passionate about and sharing that information in our personal spaces and really connecting that to the bigger picture of how can I help my community and how can I make a difference? How can I be a catalyst for change and work in a profession, take my art to that next level, to be almost like standing in the food pantry sorting food. So not being the boots on the ground, but being in that space. So when you're an advocate, you're a good listener, you're adding value to your community. So all of these pieces are coming together. And what I really hope that you understand about this piece is that when we're talking about communication, public relation, and the field that you're going into, it really comes back to the word relationship. So communication is two-way. Listening is a great idea. Sometimes we just keep our mouth shut. Sometimes we don't have to add. And then we can make changes, and we can be a catalyst for change in our community. So to conclude this whole thing, first of all, I hope that I've helped you understand a little bit about how I use social media, what social media philosophies, what does that mean, what does digital mean, and why does that matter to me in an organization, but also professionally. I hope that I have also inspired you to want to get involved, to be a digital volunteer. There are all kinds of organizations. I know the United Way here would be happy to have you reach out to them. I have given contact information to the Red Cross communicator, to Dr. Levincius, and I'm sure that there are other agencies or organizations that are here locally that maybe this has been inspiring to you to want to get involved. So I will close by saying social media is not going away. It's here, but it's ever changing. And as professionals, it's our job to adapt and change and face every challenge every day in a way that makes us stronger as a community. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions, or if you want to take it online. I know everybody's watching the screen. It's pretty exciting. So does anyone have any questions for me? Or yes?
What type of training goes into the Red Cross for the digital volunteers?
So there is actually a training class that you can work out, and it's different in each different region. So the Red Cross on a national level has specific ways that you can get involved, but then each region has a communication officer that will connect you with a digital class or with a way that you can get involved. Now, the other thing that I can speak to as far as being an advocate, you don't have to have special training for that. You can go online right now on Twitter, see what the Red Cross just tweeted, and retweet it. And that brings you into that advocacy role. So you can do that with any agency. You don't have to have permission to share that information. So contact the Red Cross to take some classes, but you can be an advocate today. Anyone else?
I'll use my teacher voice and my radio voice. No. Can you talk about the difference between blue sky advocacy and gray sky advocacy? Those are terms I've heard you use before.
Yes, absolutely. So we, in disaster, we have a term, it's gray skies. So when things are in crisis communication mode, that's this gray sky piece. And so advocacy in that mode looks a little different. It might be that you're resharing information about where the shelter is, about what's happening with disaster response in that area. For blue skies, which is where I find myself now mostly working with United Way, is that day-to-day interaction. How can I help talk with my community about poverty, about homelessness, about the things that the United Way deals with on a day-to-day basis? So blue skies versus gray skies, really is the difference between a day-to-day conversation and a crisis communication aspect. Okay. All right, well, thank you guys so much.